I know. Right, so.
Right here. Yeah, plus.
Yeah, so like we do only for like a few days and then usually if they forget, it's like, hey, don't forget to pick up your stuff. Because normally they'll send the crew out, but they need to bring a flatbed. They need to bring a flatbed to come and get their plane.
I was surprised on a long weekend.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, trust me, we get calls about them and it's just like, okay, I'll drive by and let them remind them, so it's just, let us know if you see them. But we'll pick up.
There's a great chair.
Oh.
Small, so we might only have 2 people in your department.
Yes, exactly. I have 2 people under me, so who are also like above me in different ways, but it's gonna be fun. It's very Harry Potter. I just got that. I love it. To vote on Josh King, yes.
Yeah, I've seen this.
It's
In like 5 minutes, I had all 6 chickens. I can't figure out somebody in
If you don't like my work, you let them know.
I give it up. Yeah.
It's fluffy, but.
No, that was
That was the old one. There's a really ridiculous.
Well, there was. It's great. Glad to see you, Karen. Yeah. Been busy.
Yeah.
Moira.
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 That's a good one.
These are the chickens on our street. They all have names,
Mhm.
but they were voting. On Moira Rose.
You like the Golden Girls, the shades are.
Leslie Bud and.
What's up, but.
Okay, we're good to go.
We are ready.
Okay, it is 5:30 and we have a quorum. I would like to call the meeting to order. Do I need to vote on that? I have already taken the attendance and the only 2 people that we do not have are Susan Sunderman told me that she is out of town. In fact, she's on the road right now. And I guess that's it. Okay, we have with us tonight the Director of Public Works, Todd Regg, and I believe on the line we have Chief Curtis. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have to review and approve the minutes from last time's meeting.
I have a question.
Okay,
Do the action items, are they part of the minutes?
no, technically they're not. If they're anything, they could be an attachment to the minutes.
Okay, so if I have a correction on those, that's the different.
Yeah, we can talk about that now, or you can give it to me later and I can update it.
It was just on our Complete Streets initiative
Okay,
that that was submitted to the mayor in April 18th.
April 18th.
So there's May 22nd and June 12th. It says, hey, we're still working on. That's been all approved, signed off and submitted.
Okay,
So
okay,
that May 22nd and June 12th comments should be
submitted to the,
submitted to the mayor. She was going to forward on to the city manager,
okay,
and it was submitted on April 18th.
April 18th. Okay, thanks.
Is that the only one that was behind?
That's the only one that jumped out at me.
Okay.
Thank you for catching that. Back to the meeting minutes, anything anyone wants to add or suggest?
Motion to accept. I second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye, okay, good. Thanks, Aaron. Okay. Now, normally we would invite guest attendees if they wanted to make a statement, and we have none. So I think we're good there. However, I did receive this afternoon an email from Dave Buck. And he, in lieu of attending, he sent an email, and he asked me to read that email. what I would like to do, in light of the fact that we're trying to get to talk about the parking issue, what I would like to do is send you that email. And we can talk about it at the next meeting. Would that be okay? Sure. Okay. All right.
Send it to me, and I'll be part of the minutes.
Okay.
So then it's fine.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay.
I believe I had it as well.
Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay, good. Send-
Tomorrow, I'll just forward that email
Okay,
out to the entire.
Oh, that'd be great.
TAC, and
Okay.
Send it to Aaron as well.
all right, thank you. Okay, so the major piece of business tonight is to talk about the parking, the proposal to change the parking ordinances. And I sent out a summary, which I think all of you may have already received. And it is in the packets if you have not received it. It looks like this one, 2 pages, front and back. And I sent that because I did not want to spend a lot of time at this meeting rehashing what we had already discussed. So I wanted to put that in writing and then let that be the basis for this conversation this evening. Anyone have an objection or anything they want to add before we begin? Okay, how would we like to begin? Do you, Chief Curtis, I think you had some concerns. Would you like to voice those?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Basically, Chris, they are what I sent an email to you, and that is the concerns were twofold. One, that the plan that really expresses a potential as a solution to the problem. I don't really see it as a solution until it's actually put into effect. I don't think that we'd be able to determine exactly what it would do. And the second part, well, second and third part, the second part is that it actually encourages the use of more vehicles by the students. One of the things that we tried to do all along in terms of restricting the parking was to encourage students to pool their rides, do ride share, and also for parents to transport when possible. That keeps the vehicle use down. I think what the proposal does is encourages use of more vehicles, which is exactly opposite of what I think the TAC and the Sustainability Committee are trying to do in terms of making more walkable, bicycle friendly places within the city. And then the last concern is that I think that it gives too much favor to one part of the community over the other part, being the residents who are close to the school, who are going to be pretty substantially negatively affected by removing any restrictions.
Okay. Are there things that we could do to this existing proposal that would make this more palatable?
It's as you know, it's a very difficult issue.
Yes.
I really don't see anything in a plan that, with the restrictions being removed, that would create an environment that's going to solve any of the problems that I talked about. Again,
Okay.
I'll be the first to tell you, it's kind of like an Xbox, putting things in and seeing how they come out is what that would do. But I'm seriously concerned that the result would be that the residents and the neighborhoods surrounding the school would have a pretty severe adverse impact from removing the restrictions. And again, it would encourage the students to be driving to school. And I think now with the way things are in place, they at least some of the students do try and carpool, ride share, and find other ways to get to school. So I guess the answer is I'm not real comfortable with anything that we could do that is in conjunction with removing the restrictions that are in place.
So
Again,
just,
I'm sorry, again, that's, none of that's data driven, and none of it's really been too data driven in terms of what we've done in the past. But at this point, most of the residents where the restricted parking is in effect are pleased with the results, or at least mostly pleased with the results. And so I'm not sure that removing those would cause a significant feeling of them having a negative impact on their neighborhoods.
So let's take these in order. So first of all, is it clear that we're not talking about turning all those spaces over to students? We're saying that we would split the street. One side of the street would be for residents only. The other side of the street would be for students and others. And on those streets that are too narrow, half the street would be set aside for residents and half would be set aside for students. Was that your understanding?
It wasn't totally my understanding, but even with that, there, again, if we remove restrictions and do that, what will happen, I think, is encourage the students to utilize vehicles much more. And that whatever street it might be, both sides of the street are going to be impacted, and the congestion will be on both sides all the way through. I think most of the residents, that's one of their concerns is that not as just their parking, but parking for visitors and service vehicles and those kind of things. There won't be any room for them. And I think that regardless of whether you split the street, that's going to be the result.
Okay.
Especially closer in the school. If you remove the restrictions on one side, it will probably help the outer ring, maybe even considerably, but it will make it worse for the inner ring.
Okay. So this proposal that we would try to restrict the number of students that drive is new to me. I had not heard this before. Is this a longstanding, has this been in place for a long time?
Well, it's the intent of the restrictions. It's not in the ordinance itself, but by restricting the parking availability, it forces the students to find alternative ways to share rides, to find other ways to get to school. Some of them don't care. I mean, some of them will park wherever they can park, where it's not restricted, and walk 3 or 4 blocks. But in terms of the immediate impact around the school, what it does is it has the effect of forcing students who can't get the permits on the parking lot to try and find alternative ways or to share rides or those kind of things. That's the intent, part of the intent of the restrictions.
Okay, so
I have a question, just a question on the restricted streets. Do those residents have a permit?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up, so I didn't hear the full question.
My question is, on the restrictive streets, do those residents have stickers or a permit?
On some streets where there's resident only parking, they do. There are very few of those in place. I'd say probably over 50% is strictly restricted parking from like 7 to 9 a.m. and 1 to 3 p.m. I think those are the hours, but I'm not positive about all those. Which basically does is keeps the students from parking there in the morning and effectively keeps them from congesting the street during the school day.
And is that enforced?
Is it enforced?
Yeah.
Yes, it's enforced routinely, and it's also enforced upon complaint.
So when we didn't come up with this idea to change parking kind of on our own. This is in response to petitions and people who have come and talked to the Traffic Advisory Commission about this. So Steve, can you give us a little background on where did this new proposal come from and what was their purpose?
Well, like you cited in your document, the first time since I've been a part of the committee was the residents on, was it Rosemont?
Rosemont.
And there were 2 streets.
An orchard.
Yeah, and they felt they deserved the same quality of life considerations that were in existence on Mason and Joy,
Joy.
you know,
Okay.
and so that language, it's like, well, they get quality of life, why don't we get quality of life, you know, and so we voted it down, but we didn't have as much. We didn't have all of that language. I think even though I've lived there in this congested area, I never heard the quality of life application until the chief kind of got involved with this. So I never knew that was a consideration at all. I mean, I knew that it was complaints of the residents closer that enacted it. But in the other things that have come since then, I didn't know that was still being applied, you know, I'm just saying, in the beginning ordinance.
So am I wrong? I thought that the reason we were pursuing this was that not just students, but adult residents in Webster Groves were asking for more, a more open approach to parking.
Yeah, well, that's also true, so that
Okay.
that followed as well, yeah, I mean, I think it's where folks who are affected with the congestion don't had trouble using any part of their street, whether it's for construction or for their own use or whatever, you know, so, you know, folks that have lived with those issues. And then we had students come to the meeting also who were saying, why do you keep pushing us further and
Further and further away. So,
Well, I have
go ahead.
I just want to make sure, so I'm trying to get really specific here with the three concerns and then sort of addressing them, so, and making sure I understand. So concern number one is that sort of we won't, it's not a solution until it's put into effect. We won't be able to determine what it does until it's there. I don't have a sort of rebuttal for that right now, but the second two things, the fact that it might encourage the use of more vehicles by students, I don't think that's a concern of ours. You know, we aren't in the conversation about incentivizing students to carpool. I don't know that that's our role. I suppose the school can and will do that and perhaps does that. Obviously that would be good, but we're fighting an uphill battle there. They drive, they have cars, that's our culture. So I don't know what to say about that. But number three, the third piece, I feel like you kind of just addressed this, that we're actually trying to make it more fair and more equal, and that we have unhappy residents. So if Chief Curtis is saying we have, he said he's heard from residents who are fine with how it is and that removing the signs would make them unhappy, but I feel like we think we're doing the opposite.
Right.
Based on what we've heard. Did I kind of get it right?
Right.
Okay,
If I can interject there, I'm not quite sure how many people you've heard from the petitioning to remove the restrictions to make it fair. I can only tell you, and again, I'm not historically trying to say that I'm adverse to change, nor should the city be adverse to change. But over 20 years, that has for most of the residents who've asked for restricted parking have received it. And again, like you, we're trying to strike a balance. We want most of the community to be not restriction free and be able for the students to be able to at least have some accommodation. So we did put a limit on how far out we would go with that. That's why some of the people on Rosemont, et cetera, that weren't able to get the same consideration as people on Joy. Some students will park that far out. Many students will not. So again, we were trying to strike a balance of that, and it is a quality of life issue. I think if you remove the restrictions to satisfy a very small part of the people who say there shouldn't be restrictions unless we are able to get them. If we're going to do something, then we should do the opposite. We should allow people on Rosemont and then other streets to have some restrictions. And the second part of that is, I understand it's the culture of the school students that have cars and to be able to travel. But if you're going to look at it that way, you need to apply the same standards to the public streets. And that is, you're looking at road diets and those kind of things. That's the culture. That's the culture of the area. That's the culture of the region. So if you can't say on one hand, we're going to try and control the culture here, but we're not going to try to control over here. So all I'm saying is that's only a part of the picture. I think with all those three things that I've put out, that those are our biggest concerns.
No, I agree. I mean, personally, I agree with that number two, if it does. I mean, I just don't know if it would encourage more driving. I don't know.
I'm curious if that's been the intent all along. What was done? Was there efforts made with the school or the students to relay that intent or to encourage them? Outside of just posting restrictions, was there anything done to reinforce the fact that we're trying to get less students to drive?
Right. I love that.
so there have.
When I was in high school, yes, there was.
Was there just like an information campaign?
It
or-
was whenever we did our orientation, at least we had the senior lot, and then we had the junior lot, and then and then for sophomores, said if you can drive, but you need parking's only for juniors and seniors.
Well, that's what they have now, and they can't even fit juniors and seniors.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's not even
It was
can't
still
even.
an issue, because
Yeah.
I was junior or sophomore year, senior year was when they had the second lot put in, and even then it was always packed,
Okay.
so.
I just know I have a student who just graduated and a student who's a rising sophomore. And as far as I'm aware, I think the school would like them to drive less, but there hasn't
Yeah,
been,
they've always
there's
said,
not much they can
don't.
do, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that they have many teeth to
Yeah.
that request.
As much as I understand what you did and why, and I'm not arguing that that's the best idea or the worst idea. But when I look at the many families throughout Webster Groves for whom this is a real inconvenience. They've got a child and that child has a car and they would much rather have that child drive that car than to constantly be worried every day about how are we going to get Susie to school today. So I think it would, in fairness, it would be more fair to share those available spots. And there aren't enough. I fully admit that we don't have enough spots even in the local community to take all the kids that want to drive. But I still think that for the community as a whole, that is the fairer approach.
I would have to disagree with you on that, Chris. Like I said, if you remove the restrictions, there will be more student parking. There will be more students going to school in cars. And it'll be the neighborhoods immediately surrounding the school where each block will be full each morning, every day, 5 days a week during the school year. If I were a resident in those neighborhoods, my opinion, again, this is strictly anecdotal, my opinion from our experience in the past, there's gonna be more concern from them about their ability to have a quality of life with the parking situation than people who are trying to get to and from school. They can arrange carpool rides, they can do share rides. It's not like it's a 6 mile or 7 mile drive to and from the high school. So again, we'll probably have to agree to disagree on that. But anecdotally, from the years that I've been there and from the complaints that we get, it's much more of a concern for the people in the parking on the street than it is for the commuters who go to and from school in the cars.
Okay.
There's a couple things before we move on, I wanted to touch on, that were mentioned, and one of them I didn't quite, I guess, understand this. And I think this is where I'm coming from as far as addressing student parking, addressing the issue of fairness, is that, we have a very specific stop sign policy. And when we are asked to approve or disapprove a stop sign, we follow that to the letter. For parking, that we don't have that. And so when we go to the public and say, we're saying no to your parking or yes to your parking, it's a little gray. And I feel like if we had a very specific policy, then those
We do.
residents.
We
Well,
have a written policy that the council approved.
we do, and I looked it up in the ordinances, and I guess this is part 2. The policy says if you're within 1,000 feet of a institution that has 1,000 or more persons in the building. So I assume that's students and staff. So I know that Webster Groves High School would fit that metric. But if you look at 1,000 feet around that high school, you're looking at Lockwood from Sylvester to Eden. You're looking at just barely the first third of the block of Mason and Joy. You're looking at just barely the third of the first block from Swan. So that 1,000 feet definitely is not where all of our parking restrictions are. And I realized that somewhere along the way, there was I think there's even wording added that says if you're a neighbor to one of these districts and you see an increase due to their parking restrictions, then you can get them. But to me, that's not transparent. So we have parking restrictions that go all over. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No.
I'm not aware of anything that is a variance to that policy. And that policy is not for restricted parking. That policy is for resident only parking. So
Okay.
if you're referring to that, the 1,000 foot requirement, that is for resident only parking. The parking outside of that, we have allowed residents to request restricted hours parking, whether it be for students or for other reasons. And we have the past TAC members have agreed upon and passed ordinances for the restricted parking. So that's where there's some leniency or variance to the 1,000-foot rule, but it is a different restriction and it's not resident only, it's restricted hours. So for instance, if you're outside of that 1,000-foot zone and you request, can we have no parking between 7 AM and 9 AM, which for the most part is going to either totally restrict or at least cut down significantly parking by the students because they have to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. We have allowed that. And again, we've allowed it to creep out into the neighborhoods and we've tried to have a balance there where at some point we say, that's a little too far out. Most students aren't going to park a half a mile or 3/4 of a mile away from school. I'm not going to say it doesn't still happen because I know that it does. So that's where there is some variance to the rules and some variance to where we can allow some restricted parking to give people relief. So it's not exclusively to the 1,000-foot. The only difference is restricted parking hours and resident only parking. So those are the two things there that are separate issues.
Okay,
I like your point though, Carrie, that like the stop sign ordinance, there's not variance. I mean, we apply something and then we don't think, oh, well, we can do this because it's outside the variance, what we can.
or
do.
quality of life, which is a very
Yeah.
hard metric to pin down.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think that the where it folds over from resident into restricted is very confusing to me. And
Well, the council is also allowed. We try to follow the warrants for stop signs, but there have been stop signs that have been outside the warrants that are specifically stated in that. We try to stick with it, but sometimes for, I won't say a number of reasons, I'd have to go back, but I know 3 or 4 stop signs specifically didn't meet those warrants, but the people who were requesting it were able to persuade the council that it was needed and it was passed. So it's
Right.
ultimately a council decision if there's a variance of that kind. But in general, we do try and stick within the metrics of whatever is warranted. Again, if the community would like it and if the TAC would recommend it, I would have no problem establishing a requirement rule, some kind of rule with a distance barrier to move that out further.
Hmm.
But again, we need to be careful about that because as you said, it is a whole community.
So,
There's quality life issues there with everything. So we don't want to have everything be in black and white and not be able to have some wiggle room if we find it's necessary. But at the same time, we do want to try and stay within the guidelines and be reasonable, but also be able to promote a quality of life for people so that they don't have concerns and complaints and legitimate issues with things like parking in front of their home, where it's either an inconvenience for them, visitors, or for service vehicles.
Chief Curtis, you could provide us a little history. Has there ever been a discussion with the school about, do they have any plans to provide additional parking? Is there even the opportunity to do that?
There has been discussions with the school when most of these, I shouldn't say most, when the majority of the resident-only parking and some of the restricted parking was put in, there was a discussion. There was no parking lot, student parking lot. That was a vacant lot. It was adjacent to some property there. The school district was able to access it and own, but that was built as a result of there was absolutely no off-street parking for students. I guess it was 20 years ago, and that was built maybe 15 years ago. So they have actually done what they can. I don't think they own any more property. It's possible that they might make an arrangement with Webster University for their parking garage, but that's pretty far out. I don't think
Or
students.
perhaps bus service. Those of us that rode the bus to school.
yeah, right.
Well, that's another issue, and it's one of the things that was discussed with the school district. So those are issues that have been looked at in the past a number of times, but as with the city being landlocked, I mean, there are certain things that they can do and that they can't do, both with the availability of area for parking, but also with the expense of it. So, but they did, that parking lot that has not always been there. That was constructed, I think, maybe 15 years or so ago.
Chief, I would just like to throw in you painted the picture that blocks would be congested if they were opened up. And so I'm pretty familiar with lots of friends on the 300 block of East One. And so if some student parking was allowed on one side of the street, on half of one side of the street, which is what the proposal is, I think I count space for at the most maybe 5 cars on that side of the street. So it's It's not fully congesting a block like that. It's allowing, for the sake of the fairness, that people, that the areas are treated equally. That's my image of what it would look like. Not opening, not getting rid of ordinances that would then allow just complete congestion, but allowing part of the block to have some cars. And so in that block, I think it would amount to 5 cars on one side of the street that would be open to students. So I just want to.
But I right, and I wouldn't disagree with that necessarily.
Okay.
Anecdotally, though, if you will drive those streets during the school day, during most of the school year, I think what you would end up finding is that other side of the street isn't going to be vacant. There will be some parking on there, and at some points, especially because, like you said, there's not a lot of parking area. It will be congested, and they'll all be along there. And again, that it's an arbitrary standard that you're setting there, just like the arbitrary standard that we already have that we're talking about. Well, we want to be fair,
Yeah.
not arbitrary.
Yeah.
There isn't any logical reason to that other than the fact that we're trying to restrict student parking. So
Yeah.
I guess there's a balance there. If we decide that we want to do that,
Yeah.
I would not necessarily oppose it. I think that you're going to find that most of the residents who are
Yeah.
used to having the no parking or restricted parking
Yeah.
are going to be very dissatisfied when those
Yeah.
are changed and the students are going to be parked all over the streets.
It is interesting for me because I live in that corner, the number of friends over there who, when they walk by on the 300 block, 200 block of East Swan, will say, man, this isn't fair, and those who live where it's protected have said that to me often over the years. So it's just, I agree with you. There will be many that would be displeased with them.
Well, I'm not quite sure about that Swan part of the Swan there, but I know there are a couple of streets where we have said we would probably agree to doing some restricted parking. And the response from the residents were basically, we don't really want that. So there are some areas where I would agree. There are some residents who actually don't want the restrictions, and we have not put that there, although they have been offered that.
Yeah.
So Chief Curtis, I don't want to dwell too much longer on this because there are other things that we probably want to talk about. But I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit. If we can resolve some of the other issues, are you open to letting us go forward to the city council and let their judgment rule? Because at this point, we're really holding off until we get your blessing, quite honestly.
Well, quite honestly, I don't know that I can agree. It would depend upon what kind of plan you have. Obviously, I really do appreciate the work. I know it's extremely difficult. There is no really ideal solution to this. And I know you're trying to work through it to get to some point like we have in the past where at least there's a balance and the majority of people, students and residents, can be happy. If we can have an alternative plan, I mean, I would be fine with that. I would support it. But ultimately, here's where I'm at on that. And that is, if the community wants it, if you recommend it and the council votes for it, I'm not going to stand in the council meeting and tell you that you're wrong. And I'm certainly not going to tell the council they're wrong. It's your community. You are the ones that make the decisions. The council is the one that makes the decisions on what's satisfactory and what the residents want. So if you get to that point, whether I feel like it's the right thing to do or not, you're not going to see me stand up in the council meeting and oppose it. At the same time, and I'm trying to be honest about that because that's what they pay me for, is to give an honest opinion. What's on the table right now, I think, would be detrimental to the residents in that area without a balance of providing any benefit to the students. And again, also, it's not just the parking. I think it would encourage students to drive and park much closer to the school, and it would create a situation that's more difficult and impact the area immediately around the school much more severely than it is now. So I don't know if that helps you or not. Like I said, I'm not trying to work against you. I'm not trying to certainly be contrary to what you're looking at. I just, for what's on the table right now, I just don't feel like it's to the best benefit of the parking situation in the community. And I'm trying to be honest about that. If you feel it's the right thing to do and it goes before the council and they feel it's the right thing to do, it really doesn't make any difference for what I think.
Look, I want to be totally clear, because your main concern is that residents who are a tiny bit farther from the school are going to feel a significant negative impact. but the ones really close to the school are gonna.
No, I think it's
the
where
opposite?
yeah, the ones who already
Okay,
have the
okay.
parking restrictions now, that we would be
Oh,
changing.
okay.
I just have one quick question for you too, Chief Curtis, and staff in the room may know the answer, but you've given us the most background on the ordinances. So in 60, I found the resident only parking, but is there somewhere I should be looking? Because I haven't been able to locate the parking restrictions. So not for residents, just no parking. Do you happen to know where to look? Or does
I
anybody?
don't
in
know
the-
that. I'm sorry, but I don't have the code memorized.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just
type
didn't know if you
type
would, yeah,
It's in a table.
Okay.
It's not in the actual, it's in a table further down.
okay, I'll keep looking. I just, I think I was
It's under-
thinking for clarifying, I was confusing I think the resident and the no parking, and so I'm trying to now figure out what I'm confusing.
Right, a lot of the resident parking is independent, and it's not in a schedule. Although I can't swear to that either, that's, as you know, it's a pretty big code book. Director Reg probably has even a better idea than I do, but it's in there, it's just difficult to find. Like I said, it's under restricted parking hours, not under necessarily under no parking. And I don't think it's under a large schedule. I think they're actually independently listed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. So with your blessing, I think we're gonna move on and see if we can find some other things that, if this were to go forward, needs to get addressed. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, Chris, I'm not trying to work against you, and I'm not trying to be discouraging. I just, again, I think what the city wants and what I think you want is just my honest opinion on these issues, and that's what I'm trying to give you. It's a very, very difficult and challenging thing. So I appreciate your work on it. If for some reason this were to move forward and it was to pass, the council felt it was the right thing to do. I mean, I'm not going to tell you did the wrong thing. It's just, I really think that hopefully we can come up with something a little bit better than this. I think removing all the restrictions would not be the best way to move forward at this point. But again, just my opinion, most of it's anecdotal based upon the history of the parking and dealing with the residents.
a related question, then, based on your experience. Would there be any value at all in us going to the school board? And putting this back on their plate, which ultimately it really should be? Or is that just a lost cause and we need to move on?
But
I don't think
that-
encouraging more parking is something I want to put my name to.
Okay,
Right, well, the school district does bear some responsibility, and the discussions, especially early on, that we had with them in terms of what they could do, what we could do to try and help with the student parking, were certainly at the forefront. I think they're pretty restricted on what they can do, but I don't think there would be any negative reason or any reason not to at least maybe go and have a discussion with them to see if there's something that they might think of that we're not. But it's really difficult. I think they're, as far as the available land or available solutions for them, and the cost are probably.
I mean,
pretty prohibitive.
they could perhaps give people, Monday, Tuesday driving privileges and other people Thursday, Friday or something.
yeah.
You could have done that way.
Well,
Can you imagine policing that
yeah.
for high school students?
I guess I'll answer my
Not
own.
policing, enforcing.
But then there are-
That would be your job.
There'd be two colors of a sticker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll answer my own question. I really don't think that's our place.
Right.
I don't think that's what we're about.
So,
I feel for these young people and I feel for their parents. But it's not really up to us to take that one on. I think they have to do that.
Sustainability was maybe going to have high school interns or volunteers. I feel like this is something that needs to be student driven if it's gonna work. And if the kids get on board with reducing carbon emissions and walking and
Well,
that would work.
and I would argue
That's
that
how we were in high school. I'll tell you that. We wanted to try.
Nerds and we may, well, no, actually, we're not gonna do that.
The students that walked out 2 years ago though for
Well, see,
climate, so.
my thinking is, the pain can't be that bad because they're not getting mom and dad involved.
Mhm.
If we had mom and dad in here, 3 deep at the door. Clamoring to get this problem resolved, it
Yeah.
would get resolved,
Yeah.
but
It's the same,
they're not doing
get on your feet.
I do,
Yeah.
it. Okay,
I think.
do we have other
If I
elements?
could just really quick.
Oh, sorry.
I do think that your concept of providing input or seeking input from the school board isn't a terrible idea. To let them know that we are attempting to address this. And so I think if you're okay with it, I'd be happy to reach out to Dr. Simpson and see if he'd be willing to send a representative from the school board or from the school district, including the student representative that sits on the school board, to the next meeting. And they can at least give you their insight and what the parameters they have and the difficulty they have in getting parking for everyone. Because I think it would help direct your idea of what is a reasonable alternative here, if there is one.
That's good.
Point out that we did have students
I
come
agree.
and tell us exactly that. We had students come and tell
They
us
did.
how difficult it was, but you know, the districts being involved isn't bad either. But just to, I guess, just to clarify that we.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
I will do so, and I will get someone here then for the next meeting.
December, I think, of
Thanks,
last year,
David.
so it was probably, yeah. Okay.
Okay,
I have it in here.
sorry, I'm trying to keep us down.
No, that's, she was asking when that was. I was trying to
I
figure
was
it out.
thinking it was a long time ago, like. That's fine.
So are there, aside from the
2021.
issue that we, sorry?
Do you want to see Todd's got input too then?
Sure, yes, of course.
I'm with Chief Curtis about, you know, upsetting the residents that you remove the restricted parking. So you gotta find that.
Well, and that's a hard balance to
That is
find.
tough to find.
And
For years.
Yeah, I do think that we're not, we want to clarify, we're not removing it, we're editing it. And I'll also point out, just for the record, because we had concerns about this and we talked about this. I drove those streets multiple times on school days, just out of curiosity. I never saw more than 4 cars parked on entire Joyer Mason, like 4 cars. I mean, there's a lot of room to share there, not to give up, but to share.
Yeah, and anecdotally, I mean, I live on a street that's not near, or it's near elementary school, but I work from home now, and there's 1 car on our street all day long. That's it. So I think we did talk about that. I'm with you, though. I don't want to be a part of anything that encourages people to drive. So I really appreciate hearing that perspective. I certainly don't want to encourage more people driving to school, and if this might participate in that, but I think we were talking about who do the streets really belong to. I don't, as a resident, I don't feel like that space in front of my house belongs to me. I just don't,
It doesn't.
and it doesn't.
Doesn't.
And so when people say that's my space, I mean, my neighbor pushed a painter in front of my house with painting our house. And I mean, to me, that's ridiculous. I mean, but it doesn't belong to me. I mean, I don't think it does. So I live sort of near where Olive and Oak is, and people were a little bit up in arms about, oh my God, if we don't have enough parking for them. And half of us on the street said, we'd love to have a vibrant downtown. If people could park here.
Yeah.
More power to them. So it is a tough situation, and I know there's a balance. But personally, I don't think that doesn't belong to me.
Yeah, the only qualm I have with what's been said, probably, Chief Curtis, I appreciate your point of view and you helped me think this through better, but you kept saying remove restrictions, and that feels misleading because we're not removing them, we're sort of rewriting them. And I kind of feel like sucks to be you. If you're gonna be a resident who now has to share some of the burden of cars on your street, you bought a house near a school. I live on South Elm. I know I'm gonna have traffic. It could be safer and better if we did specific things that are data-driven, proven to be better, but I also know I live on a busy street, so they have to know that too.
Yeah.
I feel like that's where we're coming from, and
It's
that's
exactly-
why we need this change.
And I think more uniform, I think that's the part we're really struggling with.
Instead of willy-nilly rules, consistent rules that make sense.
And I think that the data that you provided on this first page, about 16% of students arrive by car. Today, that's over 60%. I think when we look at, was that done by anybody to enhance student driving? No, I mean, it's just cultural
No,
changes.
yeah,
And so I think in the last 20 years, there's been cultural changes, you know, and
Right.
so I can't prove that opening a few spots is our doing to make kids drive more. I think it's just cultural changes. I mean, I think
That's
it's
right.
just going. through
Yes.
times, and we have to respond to that,
Yeah.
I think,
and frankly, I'm a bit disappointed in the school
Yeah.
system
that they have.
for not recognizing that
Right.
responsibility and doing something back when it was possible to do something. But we are with, we got what we got.
Right.
So, yeah,
I think they did purchase lots and build lots as they've been able to from that standpoint, from the parking standpoint. Now, I don't know about
Yeah.
encouraging less, but I think some of that's outside of the school district's ability, to be honest.
Chief, can I ask you a question? So in the area south of Big Bend, where the restrictions were set up for the university. So we've got this, so no university students park over, they built the garage. Are you leery about stepping back from restrictions over there? Because, I mean, residents may say, hey, we're happy we got used to it. On the other hand, you know, we're forcing an issue that maybe doesn't exist anymore. So I'd be curious what your thought is on Catalina, whatever those streets names are over there. Do you think a lot of university students would spill back over
Yeah,
there?
I am not nearly as concerned about, should we move the parking restrictions there? The garage, I think, accommodates
Yeah,
most, really, if not all, the students, along with
University.
the
yeah,
lots that they have for the dormitory for the university.
yeah,
But and again, it's just a consideration. There would still be students that would park there. The residents have gotten used to it, so
yeah.
really, this is more of a more a political issue than a safety or quality of life issue.
Okay.
So I'm a lot less concerned about that than I am about the high school
Oh,
part.
high school. Okay, thanks.
I'm gonna ask, the director, you gave us a great feedback on the incorporation of safety in our proposed, I guess, in the proposed policy and looking at street widths and making sure. I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to elaborate on that. I just wanted to open the floor to that because I appreciated that feedback.
No, I like what you guys are proposing on the narrow, medium, and wide streets.
Okay.
Or which ones can have parking on both sides, one side, and another without parking at all.
Okay, again, I think we're trying to be more transparent and then
There are
it seems like
streets-
a,
There are streets we can't even get a trash truck.
I have.
And people are complaining, I can't get my trash picked up. Talk to your neighbors about parking on the street.
Right, exactly.
They
I
got
would say,
driveway.
one of the times I was driving around trying to see parking outside the school. I was there right as a landscaping truck came and parked on Swan somewhere. And I could not, like, luckily they were behind me, but if the next person that came down the street was not, I looked at that truck and I thought, you're not leaving today until school is out. I hope you're planning to stay here all day because you will not fit down the street at this point. So that was, yeah.
And then how do you get a bar truck?
No, right. And trash, we heard from a resident somewhere along the way who said that they had lost their, like a rearview mirrors were getting lost because of trash
Yeah.
trucks.
Jana.
Yeah. So, that was another one of those light bulb moments. So, okay, I just wanted to know if you had any other thoughts on this. So.
Maybe they'll start a system like we have with sewer laterals, where if you get your mirror knocked off, you get another one free. Just have.
We all pay a little bit of insurance.
So are there other things about this as written that if we're gonna go forward, and that's still a question. Are there other things that we need to fix? Are there things that you're concerned about that?
Mayor, or the city manager really wanted implementation down there.
Yes.
So I think, you know, I came to the realization, probably Chief Curtis's feedback, and I think, yeah, that was a mistake. You know, I think I took on implementation, just trying to say, hey, we're thinking forward about
Right.
it, not trying to be cavalier about it, but made mistakes. So I think it'd be good to
Flesh
we
it out
worked on it some, but I
a little
think-
bit, yeah,
but
but not
not
much.
a lot better.
So my thinking on that, now that I step back and look at it, is the big thing is that if on day, certain date, bang, all those old
Right.
ordinances go away, it's gonna be chaos.
Right.
Is it fair? I don't know how difficult this would be. But I know that you probably have a staff crunch as far as changing a whole lot of signs.
Yes.
Would it make sense to do this block by block? Where on this block, we're gonna make those sign changes on this date. On this block, it's gonna be this date, on this block, this date, and then the ordinance, the new ordinance becomes effective on that block 2 weeks after the signs appear.
Just a little open.
Yeah. I mean, is that workable? I guess that's my question.
That seems like something that both the Public Works and the Police Department can negotiate and figure out in the event that this ordinance were to pass. I would let it up to the how to actually enforce it and to implement it to the experts. into the stack rather than trying to delineate it yourself.
Yeah, so David, I think what you're saying is don't try to write it into the ordinance. Make
Yeah.
that part of the implementation.
Yeah, I would, I think the chief and Todd know how to do that the best, and I would leave it to them to figure out if this ordinance were to pass, how to implement it in the best way.
Okay, well, that's great, but that's better for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And it allows for flexibility. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Anything else?
I was hoping we could talk about complete
Yes.
streets.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Clark asked me the same thing earlier and I walked right over it. So if we don't have anything more to talk about with this project, Clark has a request regarding complete streets, and since Todd, since you're here, and Chief Curtis, since you're here, he's got a couple of questions specifically for you guys.
but no discussion. This is just a really taking the temperature. And for David, this is for David as well.
Okay,
Because Complete Streets is one of our major initiatives that we're working through with the Sustainability Commission. So my question is, and I think it'll help guide us in how we move forward. First question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm gonna ask each of you, so put me on the spot. How comfortable do you feel with the understanding of what Complete Streets is? And there's no right or wrong answer.
10 is you get it and 0 is you know nothing.
correct.
I would say I'm about a 6.
6?
Yeah.
Dale?
Yeah, if you're asking me, I would probably have to put about the same number on that. I'd say I feel like I'm somewhere in the 6 or 7 range.
Okay. And David?
I would say I understand the concept of complete streets. I don't understand how it's gonna affect Webster Grove, so I would.
Okay, wait, you gotta answer this question, 0 to 10.
I think it's a two-part question. I understand what complete streets means from.
I haven't gotten to my second question yet.
From a theoretical
So-
standpoint, I
so-
don't understand what it means necessarily from a Webster Grove standpoint, so I would put mine at a 4.
In an understanding of what it is,
What it is from a standpoint from Webster Grove specific.
okay.
That's up your second.
No, that doesn't really answer my question.
That's the answer you get.
And then, and I don't want you to necessarily speak for the rest of the city council, but do you? And maybe you'll say no comment. What do you think the overall understanding of complete streets is by the city council? Is that impossible for you to answer?
Again, I think the problem is not necessarily everyone's on board with the idea of creating a complete streets atmosphere in Webster Groves. The question is, how do we implement it and how do we move forward from a city specific way?
Okay, well, that's the work. Okay, I got you. So then my second question is, how enthusiastic are you personally regarding the potential of Webster Groves passing a complete streets policy? For Webster, like how on board are you? Or how enthusiastic are you for Webster Groves to pass this?
Same scale?
Yeah.
I'd say between 7 and 8.
Dale?
I'd say I'm still in the same place, probably a 6 or 7, but I probably, and I know that's not the answer you want, I'm close to Councilman Franklin on this, and that is, I would need to be a little more comfortable, be more enthusiastic about it. I need to be a little more comfortable about not exactly necessarily, but how comprehensively overall that works for the city of Webster Groves. And I've done, obviously some research on it. I'm aware of some of it. We're a little less of an urban center and a little more spread out residentially. So I don't have the complete picture of exactly what it can do for us. If I knew a little bit more in that area, I'd probably could maybe jank it up to a 7 or 8, but right now I'm probably somewhere in the 6 or 7 range.
Okay. And David, you have 3 answers for this one?
Well, I love to lawyer people, so Well, I would say I am on board 110% for what the concept of complete streets, but I like to be pragmatic. And so something that is pragmatic. And so nibbling around the edges sounds good for me to begin with, and then trying to address this from a holistic standpoint, taking into sustainability, everything like that as we move forward.
No, that's really helpful, and I think, you know, honestly, we talk sort of similarly to trying to have guidelines around the parking. That it'll make some of our decisions easier if we look at it through those lenses of when a request comes in, you know. Really taking out our first impulse is to say, these streets are for the cars. And I think if we look at it through a lens of how is it affecting everything else, I think that's where our discussions have gone. So I think this is really helpful. I mean, I think we have some work to do in terms of education and then implementation. Obviously, that's a big key to that. So that was very helpful to me, you know, just anecdotally again, walking here tonight down Elm. And you walked on the same thing. I decided to look at everybody's, you know, 40% of the people were driving, looking at their cell phones. 40%, I counted.
Oh my
Just from Cedar to here. And that was 15 people looking at their cell phone. So we make that so you can drive fast, right? Or do we look at next time we redesign that street, do we look at how the design of the street is to slow traffic down? That's what Complete Streets does, is think about the pedestrian and holistically. So, you know, that's an anecdotal thing, but it's scary as hell if you're trying to cross the street where there are no crosswalks, you know, or there's a, you know, just a thoroughfare through there, so.
And you and I, because we walk a lot, we see that.
Yeah, you do. I mean, it's unbelievable what you see when you actually get out of that compartment of the car. So,
Yes.
anyway,
Okay.
off my soapbox. And we
Are-
let our.
Do you need more?
No,
You good? We're right at quitting time. I thought this was incredibly helpful, this discussion. Chief Curtis, David, Todd, thank you very much for attending. We appreciate your input. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Or is there any other business that we need to talk about?
yeah, do we have any new business?
When I get items in, we try to solve them between Public Works and the police and any existing ordinance we have. I have a couple things on the plate right now, but I'm waiting to get some information back before I bring it to you guys. So if we can solve it without bringing it to you, then that's our objective.
Actually, we're looking forward to something simple. We can actually get our feet.
Yeah, can you
I'll bring you a stop sign.
No.
Doesn't meet requirements.
Thanks for that. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.